Fucking alien scum. Whew. Alright. Now that I've dealt with that... Hello everyone, my name is Mike, and this is The Bored Cyborg. Welcome back to yet another episode. Today I am taking a look at 6 underrated sci-fi action films from the 90s. These are all films that I do feel are underrated, less seen, not talked about, etc., etc. And I wanted to come in here today and talk about each one of these and sort of expose them to you guys. Hopefully you find a new film or two to check out. These are all solid sci-fi action films from the 90s that I think are underrated. I'd love to know what your favorite sci-fi action movie from the 90s is, whether it's a big budget Hollywood movie or an obscure one. I'd love to know, so feel free to leave that down in the comments below, and we'll get a little discussion rolling as per usual. The 90s were home to some really cool sci-fi action concepts, you know, virtual reality, and it was very cyberpunk since the dawn of cyberpunk in the 80s, going into the late 80s, early 90s. It carried over into the 90s cinematically. It was such a cool era to grow up in with these great little sci-fi action films. Of course, The Matrix probably being the most popular of the sci-fi action cyberpunk genre. First up, these are in no particular order. I want to talk about Virtuosity. Virtuosity. This one is directed by Brett Leonard, who I think made a couple really solid sci-fi action films in the 90s. I'm a fan of Lawnmower Man. I don't really care what anybody says. I really love the creativity on display in that movie. It's a wacky movie. It's not a perfect movie, but it is so much fun, and the virtual reality ideas and the early CG, something about it just makes me feel home. Maybe it's because I grew up during this time, but I just love it. Virtuosity was the film he did after Lawnmower Man, actually, and it stars Russell Crowe and Denzel Washington. Washington plays an LA cop who is after Russell Crowe, who plays an artificial intelligence in this sort of training simulator for cops. This character, Russell Crowe's character, Sid, is a compilation of like 200 different serial killer profiles into one. That's a good idea, right? This Sid, this artificial intelligence, is on the brink of breaking out of this virtual reality simulator, and Denzel is tasked to take him down. And the rest plays out like a sort of cat and mouse virtual reality, so it obviously plays with your mind a little bit at points. It's got some really solid shootouts, really solid action that Brett Leonard shoots, slow motion, all that good stuff. And you get to see a young Denzel and Russell Crowe sort of going head to head. It's a really cool movie that not many people talk about, and that saddens me, so I had to come in here and bring this one up to you guys so that you could check it out. That is Virtuosity from 1995, directed by Brett Leonard. Really solid sci-fi action film. Check this one out if you haven't already. Next up is arguably one of the most underrated martial arts action films ever. This is from 97. This is Mark Dacascos' best film, in my opinion. That is Drive, directed by Steve Wang. Steve Wang worked on The Guyver. I believe he directed one of those, or both of them. He at least worked on one of them. And he would go on to do Drive a couple years before Rush Hour, actually. About a year before Rush Hour. And there's information out there that says that the director, Brett Ratner, actually talked to some of the people that made this film and said how big of a fan he was. And of course, Rush Hour has a lot of similarities to Drive, so it seems he sort of ripped it off. Both films are great. The one thing that Rush Hour has that Drive doesn't is Jackie Chan, but we do get Mark Dacascos in place of Jackie Chan, and we get some killer action sequences in this movie. Oh my god. The whole back of the box, by the way, this is a Region 2 DVD. It doesn't say anything about the movie, it just says how groundbreaking the special effects and the wire work and all the martial arts action was. So you know you're going into this movie getting a martial arts epic. The story is pretty paper thin. Mark Dacascos plays Toby Wang, who is like some sort of a cyborg that has something implanted in his chest, not unlike Iron Man, Tony Stark, to enhance his abilities. He escapes from this facility. Obviously, it's pretty sketchy. He escapes from this facility and catches wind of another facility out in LA that could remove this thing from him because it's changing him. You know, he doesn't want to be a cyborg. He teams up with Karim Harrison, and they make their way out to LA, and of course things aren't as they seem. There's good chemistry between Karim Harrison and Mark Dacascos. Good chemistry. It's not Chris Tucker and Jackie Chan, but it's decent. But the action, oh my god. These action set pieces are just incredible. There's one that comes to mind, the main one that comes to mind, is one that takes place in sort of a motel. It's a multi-faceted action sequence that goes on for like 15 minutes. It ebbs and flows just perfectly. It has those moments in every good action scene where there's a little bit of relaxation, there's a little bit of levity, there's a breathing moment, and then it goes right back into the action and ramps it up with props. Mark Dacascos, that's one thing that he does really well in this, like Jackie Chan in Rush Hour, is his usage of props, his work with props. Obviously, Wang was influenced by Jackie Chan's older work, and that hotel sequence, he's just throwing chairs and he's kicking off the walls and flipping, and then they get these electrified batons and they're just going at it. It is as good as I'm making it sound, and better. Every single action set piece in this movie is incredible, including the finale, explosions, gun fu, martial arts, fisticuffs, you name it. It is here. It is fantastic. Drive is one of the most underrated movies of all time, especially in the action genre. So check out Drive. I've talked about this one before, but I had to include it in this underrated action sci-fi films from the 90s. That is Cyber City Oedo. And this is from 1990. Like I said, talked about this before in some of my anime videos. I'm a big old school anime fan, especially the 70s and 80s, early 90s. It's just kind of my wheelhouse. I don't know. There's something about the intimacy of the hand-drawn sequences and the characters and just the way they look. I just love this era of anime. This is one of the best cyberpunk action sci-fi films you could watch, live action or not. It follows the characters Sengoku, Goggles, and Benten, each of which get their own little vignette, little story, which is about 30-35 minutes long, and it delves into the character, a little bit of the backstory, and it goes into the job that they're currently on. The setup for this is essentially these three are convicts in a futuristic city, and they have these huge sentences on their backs, and essentially they're hired by the government, and each bounty, each kill, each person they bring in, a little bit of time is shaved off of their sentence. So it's really cool. The music in this film is incredible. The score is just wonderful. I love it. I play it in the car on my way to work sometimes. It's just fantastic. It is one of my favorite old school anime soundtracks. This is directed by arguably my favorite anime director of all time, Yoshiaki Kawajiri. He did Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust, the Goku Midnight Eye OVA, the X TV series. He did some Animatrix vignettes, some Animatrix shorts, at least one. And his most famous work, I would say, is Ninja Scroll. Ninja Scroll was really the film that got me into anime. There's so many Kawajiri films that I just adore. Something about his style, something about his storytelling, his aesthetic, the music, everything about his films I adore. Cyber City Oedo is no exception. One of my favorite of his, if not my favorite. I'd have to really sit down and think about it, but check this out. It's still in print. Get this collection. It says Cyber City the Final Collection. The actual OVA is Cyber City 08808. I know it's a funny name, but it is what it is. This is the set to get. So check out Cyber City Oedo. Love this shit right here, man. Next up, I watched years ago, and Cold Harvest was my introduction to Isaac Florentine, and I was blown away with this film. I didn't know the director at the time. I had picked this up at a pawn shop or whatever, popped it in, expecting like obviously a martial arts B movie, which this is, with decent martial arts. I got a martial arts B movie with excellent martial arts. Gary Daniels, Isaac Florentine. This is wonderful. The first action sequence that takes place in the saloon had some of the most creative camera work for an action film that I had seen at the time. Now, I didn't see this in the 90s. I saw this in probably the late 2000s, and it just absolutely floored me. The camera work was creative. The angles weren't generic. They were inventive. He was putting the camera in places that I wouldn't even think to put in an action film, but it works so damn well. Gary Daniels, he's a decent actor, but it's more about his presence as a martial arts actor in this, and he does a fantastic job. It's a post-apocalyptic action sci-fi movie. Gary Daniels plays a bounty hunter in this post-apocalyptic sort of wasteland that is tasked with finding this group of people called the Sources. They hold an antibody to a disease that has ravaged the planet, essentially. And so he's tasked with finding them, and things, twist and turn as it goes along, and more information about our bounty hunter's past is exposed to us, and it's really paced well. The acting is decent, it carries you through, but goddamn the action in this, the cinematography, the choreography. Isaac Florentine is a martial artist himself, and so a martial artist who knows how to direct. He just makes some excellent martial arts films. You'd know him mostly from Undisputed movies, 2, 3, he did not do Boyka, but 2 and 3, he's done a ton of movies with some of the best underrated martial arts actors out there. He even did a movie a couple years ago with Antonio Banderas, where Banderas was throwing down. It was great. But Cold Harvest, guys, check this one out. This is definitely one that's not talked about very often. Maybe in the martial arts circles, but not in the action movie circles. So check out Cold Harvest. All right, next up is Johnny Mnemonic. I know a lot of you out there probably know this one because of Keanu. This predates The Matrix, actually. This is from 1995. And it is a cyberpunk film written by William Gibson. Now, a little history on William Gibson. He wrote the original short story for Johnny Mnemonic in a book called Burning Chrome, which is excellent. If you guys like cyberpunk, first off, check out Neuromancer by William Gibson, arguably the book that started the genre. And then check out Burning Chrome, which compiles a bunch of his cyberpunk short stories, Johnny Mnemonic being one of them. I love the short story. It is excellent. I think it is better than the film, and it's a shame because William Gibson wrote the script for this, and he left out some things that I thought... I figured for a 90-minute, 100-minute film, he'd be able to get his whole 15-page short story into it, but he went a different route, and I understand artists change and they want to... Maybe he didn't like some of the things he wrote in the original Johnny Mnemonic, and he tried to fix them here. I don't think he fixed them, but I still think Johnny Mnemonic is a blast. I love this movie. It is such a time capsule for me. It transports me right to the mid-90s, late 90s, and it is just wonderful. The story is about Keanu Reeves' character, who plays Johnny Mnemonic, obviously, and he is a cybernetic courier. He's not a cyborg, but essentially what happens in this future, William Gibson deals with sort of corporate espionage and cyberpunk themes and biological enhancements. In this future, essentially they implant information into people's brains, and they are tasked with bringing that information elsewhere, trading the information, whatever it may be. So it's not in a suitcase, it's in Johnny Mnemonic's brain. Obviously, this causes some trauma and some confusion for our main character at points. Dina Meyer is in this. We have Dolph Lundgren in this as the bounty hunter antagonist to Johnny Mnemonic, who's trying to get him and take him down. Ice-T is in this. He plays the leader, I believe, of... There's basically this civilization that lives in the rafters of like giant bridges. It's really, really cool concept. In the book, it's even cooler because there are like multiple layers. But Ice-T plays the head of this sort of group of people, these rebels. You have Beat Takeshi. That's right, Takeshi Kitano is in this as the main... Yes, I believe he's the main villain. This is such a fun movie, and it just, like I said, transports me to the 90s. The action is shot well. As of the time, it's very slow motion, John Woo inspired. Of course, this is coming off of The Killer and Hard Boiled, so a lot of these films are inspired by John Woo, especially Cold Harvest and Johnny Mnemonic. If you haven't seen this Keanu Reeves sci-fi action film, definitely check it out. I'd go as far to say that it's a classic. I don't know, man. I just love this movie. It does have its flaws, but it's a brisk 90-minute movie, and it's a blast. It's a lot of fun. It's weird, too. William Gibson wrote some weird shit. Check out Check out Johnny Mnemonic. Hell yeah. Last but certainly not least, I want to do an entire video highlighting this movie because I think it's one of the most underrated science fiction action films of the 90s. I really, really do. This is from 1997, and this is Retroactive. Directed by Louis Morneau, who I believe also did Bats with Lou Diamond Phillips, a film that I enjoy, a little creature feature, but this is on a whole another level. This is his masterpiece. It is not a perfect film, but in terms of Louis Morneau's movies, this has to be one of his best. This is a time travel science fiction action thriller. That's how I'll put it. It follows this young woman who's going through some shit. She gets stranded on the highway, and she's being pursued by this psychopath played by James Belushi remarkably well. James Belushi plays sociopath, psychopath guy really damn well because he balances that humor with his dark side. And so when he gets angry, you really feel him get angry, and it is frightening. Honestly, I think it's James Belushi's best performance. So underrated. Now, what makes this film unique is that this woman, as she's fleeing this sadistic psychopath, stumbles upon this facility in the middle of the desert. This is so cool. I love this concept. And she walks into this place. Well, she gets into this place somehow, I'll say. And Frank Whaley is in there, the actor, as a scientist. And he just figured out time travel. And so as this young woman learns of this time travel device, she ends up going back to try to stop this mayhem, this ravaging lunatic, before it even happens. And what follows is a Groundhog Day-esque scenario where she keeps going back and keeps f***ing up. Things get more and more out of hand. Then she goes back again and she starts figuring things out and how she could actually accomplish this. Obviously, James Belushi is unaware that she is time traveling and playing this scenario out over and over and over again. And so he's still just the relentless, sadistic, crazy guy. It's such a cool dynamic. I gotta get this woman's name because I haven't seen her really in much else. Kylie Travis is in this, and she is so great playing off of James Belushi. Man, check this movie out. I hope I did it justice in terms of its plot, and its pacing is so remarkable. The acting is solid. The film has this hazy desert look to it that really complements it. It is just so underrated. So check out Retroactive. I just want to thank you all for checking out my 6 underrated sci-fi action films from the 90s. I hope you enjoyed this little video. I'd love to know what your favorite underrated sci-fi action classic from the 90s is, so let me know down in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a thumbs up, and if you're new to the channel and want to see more videos like it, go ahead and hit the subscribe button, as well as the little bell for notifications. Anyway, guys, I will see you next time. Bored Cyborg, out. Oh! 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 Ah!